Because you mentioned you would either do football or being a cowboy.
Exactly. I had football in Fort Worth, and I had Cowboy stuff out on the West Coast.
I know you said that you spent 9 months with your mother and 3 months with your dad.
Yes, sir.
So which did you like best, or did you like both of them?
Well, I never got to pad up and play football. It was only street football. And my first
Hmm.
concussion came from my older brother and his buddies throwing me down on the curb and busting my head open. But I guess that would be pretty effective in the rodeo world as well.
So you said you went for the to be a cowboy. Um, how much dedication is there involved in being a cowboy?
Oh yes, sir. It's you could watch it on TV and maybe try to walk up if you had a lot of athleticism and things of that nature. But the problem with the sport of rodeo is there's a lot of hard work that goes in on the backside of it. I rode
Hmm.
bulls, but my dad was a rancher. And so learning how to be a real cowboy and branding and gathering cattle and hauling hay and working on trucks. I mean, we worked from 4 o'clock in the morning, well into 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. I do contribute some of that at that time, working very hard for my father, why I had that nervous breakdown at 18. There's
Hmm.
just no physical way a young person's battling, trying to find his identity can just work that way. I'm sure I wasn't eating right. I wasn't sleeping well. I was working really hard. And I'm glad that I went through that season at 18 where I had that nervous breakdown because, without that, I don't know if I would have ever been committed to the things of the Lord. And a lot of that is taking care of your body and resting and,
Hmm.
preserving the Sabbath and understanding that it wasn't all about the things that I was trying to do. So the Lord was gracious in helping me to overcome that. But we worked very, very hard as American cowboys and ranchers. It's just part of the lifestyle.
Now you went into bull riding, you became a champion eventually. But of course, growing up in that, did you have any mentors or the people that came beside you and showed you what to do and how to do it?
Yeah, my grandfather, he was in World War II and he flew in the military and got shot down and was in the war. It was amazing. When I was with my grandfather, he had 5 brothers. They were very successful in rodeo. And like I said, they were all original founders, charter members to the association where I would eventually win my world championship. They were the
Hmm.
starters of pro rodeos in the 30s and 40s. So my grandfather would always talk to me about riding bulls. My dad, in a very unique way, was really my hero because, he rode, but he didn't get to go out on the road and live his dreams. And so my dad was a very hard worker, but he always made sure that I had some kind of a horse, a cow, a calf, something in the backyard to ride. I think in a real unique way, my dad was training me when I didn't know it.
Hmm.
And
So
he was
your grand.
and he was certainly my hero. My grandfather and my dad were my heroes. And then I had mentioned Lane Frost was a role model. He was a
Hmm.
world champion in '87 when I graduated high school. And of course, I knew everything about the guys that were going to the finals. And then I wanted to get out there and live the dreams the way they were as well.
So with your dad being a rancher and your granddad being into bulls, do you think there was expectations of you to also go into it?
you know, Again, I think my grandfather used reverse psychology because I was talking about winning a gold buckle. And he told me one time, he said, Scott, you can't buy a cup of coffee with a gold buckle. And so the more that my grandfather and my dad would encourage me that there wasn't much at the end of the road, I always knew that God had already made me a world champion. And I just had to live it out in faith. And once I got right with him from 94 to 97 in my career, I knew there was no doubt that I would win that world. I would probably still be competing at my old age right now to win that gold buckle. There was that much of a focus and passion
Hmm.
that I knew that if I had that platform, eventually I would be able to do what we're doing today, and that's share the gospel around the world.
Now you told us the story of your first time on a cow was with the calf. What was your shall we say your when you look back on that one? How did you feel at that time?
Again, I was probably 4 or 5 years old, but growing up in my house, my dad had pictures of my grandfather riding, at big
Mm-hmm.
rodeos like Cheyenne and Pendleton and San Francisco at the Cow Palace. And so, when you grow up on a ranch, everybody wears a hat, everybody watches rodeo, everybody stops work and goes to the local rodeo. And so, at 4 or 5 years old, when they put me on that calf.
Life Stories Worldwide is broadcast live every Monday night at 8 p.m. UK time. We broadcast on YouTube, Facebook, and StreamYard. Why not join us every Monday night at 8 p.m. UK time for Life Stories Worldwide. Speak to us here at Life Stories Worldwide. You can simply by dialing +44 7943 550287. Call us now.
I don't know how far I rode them, just a couple 20, 30 yards across there. I just had no idea that was going to be something that God would lead my life with and give me the opportunity that he has. Everything I have stems from what I did in that arena.
So when you got to ride your first real bull, how scared were you?
Well, after the calves, I started riding steers from the age of, 8 to 12 years old. Steers
Right.
weren't too bad as a cowboy. You handle them, you rope them, you ride them, you're around them all the time. They're not mean and treacherous. But by the time I turned 14 years old in junior rodeo in Nevada, once the age limit was, I'd reached that age limit. I remember at 14 years old, I got on my first bull, and they're quite a bit bigger and they're stronger. And I just had to make that transition like anybody. It's kind of like going from little league baseball, into high school. It's just you're hitting another pitcher and the power's a lot stronger. But I never really feared it. I do want to throw this in. I can remember when my dad took me to the local junior rodeo in Reno, Nevada called Pony Bob Days. I was probably 8 years old. It was right before I went into steer riding, and they had some big heifers that the kids were riding, and we were way overmatched, and everybody was getting bucked off and slammed, and I was one of the last riders. And anyway, by the time they came to my buck and shoot, my bottom lip was quivering, and I started crying, and
Wow.
my dad was down in the chute holding this big heifer, and he's like, "Come on, it's your turn. Get down in here." And I didn't have the courage. My boots weren't able to crawl over the buck and shoot that day. It felt like they were just had concrete in them. But I say all that to say that one day I remember crying, and my dad very clearly looked up to me and told me, "If you don't get on this calf today, Scott, you'll probably never, ever ride again." And so for whatever reason, I got on that calf. I rode her about 3 jumps, a big heifer. She hit me on the ground. I hit my head. And my dad said a week later, when we were driving around in the hay truck, I asked him when I was going to go to the rodeo. And he had to laugh and said, "You've already been there and done that." So anyway, that was a day that I came face to face with my fear. And I'm so grateful that my dad, pushed me over the fear factor to get on. And from that day all the way until retirement in 2005, I was never afraid of the bulls. And in that defining moment that day, I was afraid of missing my heavenly calling, what God created me to do.
Now, is there a particular breed of bull that's used in rodeo, or a stanny bull?
Say that again. Is there a particular
Is there a
what?
particular breed of bull that's used?
In rodeo, we have a lot of crossbreeding back in my day, and today we have a lot of breeding genetics. The bulls have become quite registered, if you will. And so what they do is they draw semen from very notorious and very historical bucking bulls, and then they try to rebreed them. But yes, we have, Brangus and Angus and Charolais. They got it pretty much fine-tuned today how to recreate some very good bucking stock at a high level in our organizations today.
And what's your record then on a bull?
Well, just to give you an idea, that year in '97 when I won the world, I rode 7 out of 10 bulls. Every year that I went to the national finals before that, I had rode 6. So the old saying is, if I can just ride one more bull, I'll do well and I'll be crowned. And of course, in
Hmm.
'97, it was a blessing. I rode 7 out of 10 bulls. The highest mark ride I've ever had is 95 points. A few times, 94s, 93s, and then you start going backwards. And so there's really not any recording of one particular ride as much as it is that you were a consistent bull
Yeah.
rider in the era that I grew up. And going to the PBR World Finals, going to the national finals in the '90s was really, I was in my prime.
Okay. Do they mark you in a particular like the way you sit on the bull, or the way you hold the bull, or the particular marks that they give you?
Yes,
The
sir.
style.
That's a great question. You have two judges in the arena, and what they're responsible for is they're watching the bull buck and how hard,
Hmm.
how difficult the bull is to ride. Uh, Power of dropping, power of changing directions and spinning,
Hmm.
and then the other, and you get a 1 to 25 points for that. And then the judge also has a 1 to 25 point for how well you ride and how dominant and how stylish you are to be in control of the animal. If you notice, some guys may be hanging on the side at the 8-second whistle, where other guys
Hmm.
are sitting up and actually spurring the bull. I was a very physical bull rider. I loved to take authority and spur and be aggressive. And that was just my style. Some guys choose to just kind of ride there and not make a lot of motion, but I wanted to be flamboyant. I wanted my shaps flying. I wanted to dismount some way to always bless the fans that followed my career.
It's a big deal in America, of course, rodeo. I mean, it's a great big event, not just the bulls, is it? There's a lot more to the actual rodeo than bulls.
It's very easy to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Life Stories at Lunch, to receive notifications of when we are live. Simply click the bell. If you would like to contact us here at Life Stories Worldwide, you can. Simply by emailing lifestoriesworldwide@gmail.com or visit our website at lifestoriesworldwide.com.
Yes, sir. Today I'm working with a lot of American cowboys. I believe that the American cowboy is very symbolic for the history of this country. Whether it's motion picture, ranching, farming, rodeo is the sport that evolved out of the ranching in the Wild West back in the 1800s. And so it has a huge following. We've got wonderful fans and sponsors. And so when all that comes together, there is a lot of recognition on our Super Bowl, which is the national finals. And of course, bull riding came out of rodeo and started its own league called the
Hmm.
Professional Bull Riding Association. And so we even went as far as to develop a Christian bull riding league for young men to go through my training camps and then end up in a competition preparing them for the professional ranks. And so we have our own league where we raise them up in the fear of the Lord and give them the tools to be better riders and role models themselves.
I have to ask you this question, of course. You've done the real thing, the bulls. Have you ever tried an electric bull?
Yeah, that question comes up a lot. Yes, certainly we've ridden those. That you can use them for training a little bit. They're really just kind of a novelty to give
Hmm.
people from the city a chance to ride and compete. Today, we have a $20,000 robotic bucking machine that we take out to our outreaches in ministry, like the Navajo Nation and around
Wow.
the country, to let kids ride. And then we pass out Bible tracts and help them to understand what it means to conquer the beast in their life. I work with the FCA Cowboy chapter and an organization called USA Yo. So when we go out and speak, we take our machine and just give everybody a little window into what it is to like to
Hmm.
ride a bull. But it's really not, with technology today, it's not an old heavy bucking machine. It's actually robotic and it moves
Hmm.
around and rolls around. And so it's a lot of fun.
And have you fallen off one then?
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah. You haven't been very far from the house unless you've been bucked off and have a few scars to match it.
Now, you mentioned heroes growing up. Who were your cowboy heroes when you were growing up? I mean, from the movies or whatever. Did you have any heroes like that?
Yeah, again, I think my in-house heroes were my grandfather and my dad. They raised me very, very tough. Obviously, the guys in the rodeo, Lane Frost was a world champion, and they made the movie 8 Seconds about his life and his story. You could watch that. I didn't really watch a whole lot of westerns. My grandmother on my dad's side was a cousin to Hoss Cartwright, so I kind of grew up in
Wow.
that. I grew up in that bonanza. Obviously, I would watch John Wayne movies. I was kind of more
Hmm.
raised in the Clint Eastwood area,
Yeah.
those kind of movies. And so, just being a cowboy, you're around it, and you just live that whole life. But yeah, there was a lot of heroes in my life growing up.
So, how would you answer Willie Nelson's advice? Then he says, "Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys."
Yeah, no, there's a lot of wisdom in that for sure. Again, being an American cowboy, it's probably no different than any other sport, except for the ranchers are responsible for feeding our country.
Hmm.
The Wrangler commercials, all the toughness of our sport should carry over into the toughness of our country. And that's why I keep, bringing up country. I was blessed to be born on the 4th of July, but I think right now, if you go back and you look at a Ronald Reagan or somebody like that, that was an icon to
Hmm.
standing up to other people in the world. The cowboy is just known for his integrity and his toughness. And I think our world today needs more cowboys to come forth and to stand up for what is right. What I mean by that is ranchers,
Hmm.
farmers. These guys work really, really hard. Even the Bible mentions farmers, athletes, and soldiers as being very faithful to
Hmm.
trust in the Lord for the increase and the blessing in their life. What we need right now is the world to be more cowboy.
And will you bring your kids up to be cowboys?
Yeah, my kids all love rodeo. They don't really compete. Some of them have competed in high school rodeo. They just grown up more in the ranching industry, and they love to come home and
Hmm.
ride and help mom and dad here at the ranch to keep the cattle and the horses moving, I guess. But no, I never did. I've got my youngest boy's 16. He's the only one at home. My oldest son is 24. He's actually serving in the National Guard. He's on deployment right now. So when he gets home, you can bet he's going to want to ride his horse.
So, through all of this, you've had a lot of success, okay? And when some people become successful, they change. So, how did you deal with success?